Welcome to the greatest G Pro X Superlight review of all time. We're going to talk about mainly the G Pro X Superlight 2, and I'm going to make comparison back to the G Pro X Superlight 1 that I had. And we're going to talk about everything including unboxing, build quality, weight distribution, coding, skates, in-hand feel, pulling rate, click latency test, sensor performance, clicks, scroll wheels, side buttons, and sound test, straight line test, in-game performance, price, and if GPX2 is upgrade worthy from the GPX1. So let's jump straight into it. I'm gonna have timestamp for all of the different sections in the description below if you want to check it out. And at first, let's talk about the unboxing experience. So the unboxing experience of the GPX2 compared to the GPX1, it's not that much difference. As you can see here, I have the two of the boxes. Here on the right side, I have the GPX2. I purchased it in black variant, and then I had the original G Pro X Superlight 1. I purchased in white variant. And I've used this mouse for a year and a half and 2 years. Ever since the day it came out, I purchased it the week that it came out. And then I purchased this Superlight 2 around a week ago. I have had it for a week under intensive use in gaming, especially in Valorant. So unboxing, there isn't much of a difference. The GPX2 comes with the USB-C dongle instead of micro USB dongle, and it comes with the USB-A to USB-C cable instead of USB-A to micro USB cable. And they both come with the same grips, same cloth, and then the same little puck with the PTFE feet on that nobody uses. I don't know anybody that uses those. And one difference is the letters on the box that it says on the GPX2, it says keep playing instead of play to win compared to the first one. And that's it for the unboxing experience. You basically get the same unboxing experience on GPX1 compared to GPX2. And now let's talk about the build quality of these two mice. So the build quality, as you know, it's very solid, and it's probably one of the best that I've ever got my hands on. The build quality never disappoints. That's why they didn't want to change the shape and didn't want to reduce the build quality on these two on the second version. So the build quality is as solid as the first one. However, I do think the first one might feel a little bit more sturdy and a little bit more well built in hand, just purely because it is heavier compared to the first one. And we're gonna actually put it on the scale and weigh how much it weighs. So let's do that. I have a scale right here, and we're gonna put the GPX1 with the bottom puck on first. So I have 62 grams, and then let's take out the bottom puck and weigh it, and 61 grams without the bottom puck, which is how most people use it. And now we have the GPX2 with the bottom puck, comes in at 59 grams. And I have it without the bottom puck. Now it's 57 grams, maybe upper 57, like 58, I would say, 57 grams. So 57 and 59, and we have 60 and 62 here. So yeah, it's around 2 grams weight difference. However, the 2 grams might seem not that much, but you definitely feel it in hand, especially because of the weight distribution difference. On the GPX1, the weight is more distributed towards the back hump here, right between the G logo and the LED light. So most of the weight is centered around the hump right here. So, and you do feel it much heavier towards the back when you're using the mouse. So the front, where the clicks are much lighter compared to the back, where the battery and the other stuff are. And however, on the GPX2, the weight distribution is much better, as the weight is distributed more, is more spread out. So you don't have a heavy spot either on the clicks or on the back hump where the weight is distributed. So I would say the weight distribution makes the GPX2 feel more, definitely feel significantly lighter than the GPX2, significantly more than the 2 grams, which they are different on paper. So yeah, the weight distribution on GPX2 much better compared to the GPX1, and it's more spread out evenly across the mouse compared to the GPX1, where the weight is more centered toward the back hump compared to the clicks. So the clicks area are very light compared to the back hump. And on the GPX2, it's spread evenly. So you do not feel the weight is centered anywhere. It's spread evenly across the bottom of the mouse. So which makes it the GPX2 have a lighter feeling in hand, a little bit more than the 2 grams that are on. That's the difference on paper. So now we talked about the weight and the weight distribution. Now let's talk about the coating. So the coating is, I would say, the one thing that didn't change at all. The coating is the same GPX coating from the GPX1, and I would say it's a pretty good coating. I wouldn't say it's the best coating because it still catches some dirt. Like you would get, I don't know if the camera can catch it. You get some dirt on the coating, and I would have to like sometimes scrape it off. So, but it is, however, pretty good for sweaty hands. I have extremely sweaty hands. I am probably the sweatiest person in the world. I wouldn't doubt that. And I have no problem using this mouse with a claw and a relaxed claw, aggressive claw and a relaxed claw grip. So I have no problem picking this mouse up and readjusting, doing this a certain mechanic where I readjust the center of the mouse using my wrist alone. So I lift up the mouse and I readjust, like I swipe across like this instead of using my whole arm. I kind of do this where I lift up the mouse and readjust the sensor. So I have no problem doing that mechanic with the mouse because I can lift the mouse up with no problem even when I have sweaty hands. Because, and one thing I want to talk about that is the little grooves you have on each side of the mouse. So as you can see, the camera picks up a little shadow. That's a little groove indent on the left side, and it's also present on the right side. So that little groove is where my thumb and my pinky finger rests. So I can pick up the mouse. Those grooves and indents help a lot when trying to pick up the mouse and readjusting, especially when you do a claw grip or a fingertip grip where you do this thing a lot, where you have to kind of lift up the mouse and readjust. Not so much for palm grip users when they have low sense, because they kind of use lift up their entire arm to swipe on the mouse pad, instead of fingertip and claw users where they kind of lift up using just their wrist. So I'd say it's very good coating, not the best, but very good for sweaty hands. I didn't have to put the grips on to be able to lift up the mouse. So it's definitely good enough for me. I've been rocking it stock like this for the past week while playing intensive games like Valorant for, I would say, 4 or 5 hours a day. And now let's do a little sound test for the coating. So here's the coating on the GPX1 sound test. And the GPX2 sound test. So they do sound a little different because my GPX1 is very worn out. As you can see, like the coating wore off after a while. And that's one thing I wanted to mention, and that's why I went with the black version, because I hope this thing doesn't happen again with the black version, because it makes your mouse looks very dirty. However, I do clean my mouse surface quite frequently, so it's not because my hands were dirty or anything. It's because literally the moisture on my hand and kind of rubbed off the coating where my palm makes contact with the mouse. So hope that doesn't happen with the black version, but I have no clue. I've only had it for a week, so I can't really tell if that's going to happen with the black version or not. And that is it for the coating. Now let's talk about the skates. So this is something that's different from the GPX1 and the GPX2. So as you can see, the top part of the skates and the center part skates are the same design. However, the bottom skate design is changed. As you can see, there's a little bit more curvature on the GPX1 compared to GPX2. It's a little bit more straightened out and longer on the sides. I'm very disappointed in why Logitech did this. I'm very disappointed in the decision of doing this, as if you had any aftermarket skates for GPX1, you cannot put them on GPX2. So they needed to come up with brand new aftermarket skates just for GPX2, because they had to change this up a little bit just to screw everyone over. So I had core pads laying around from my GPX1. I can't even put it on GPX2. So I have to wait for GPX2 aftermarket skates to come out and to purchase them. So it's very annoying. I'm very pissed at Logitech doing this, and they knew exactly what they were doing when they did this. So It literally makes no difference, these two designs. There's not an improvement, just to screw over the aftermarket skates. And now let's talk about the actual quality of the skates. So I can show you guys a sound test of the skates first. These are stock skates and these are core pads. So let's do the stock skates on the GPX2 first. And here is the GPX1 core pads. As you can hear, the stock skates on the GPX2 is very, very scratchy, especially when you're doing the up and down motion. So when you're moving across the y-axis, it's very scratchy. However, on the left and right, I think I broke in the week, so it's not that scratchy anymore. But on the y-axis, is very scratchy. That is because these skates do not have curved edges. They have flat edges, so they scrape against your mouse pad, and which makes the skates very slow to get moving because of the larger static friction compared to dynamic friction. Once you get it moving, they're kind of easier to move, but however, getting them to move is pretty hard. And I would say that's the worst part about this mouse is the stock skates. And they are also very thin, so they do wear off quite fast. And then if they wear off, you have to replace them. So, however, I've been rocking them stock for a week now. I've had no issue in game besides the scratchy noise they make. I don't feel that much of it in game when I'm playing, when I'm focused. So I do think you can rock the stock feet if you're playing a tac shooter, like flick-based tac shooter, CSGO, Valorant, for example. However, if you're playing anything tracking intensive, you need to replace these skates ASAP. And I think Logitech needs to do a better job at designing their skates and just get rid of these PTFE skates, get better ones with curved edges, so people don't have to wait and upgrade their skates in the aftermarket. And now let's talk about the in-hand feel of the GPX shape. So I have used the Viper Mini Signature Edition for the past 4 months or so before getting my GPX2. And right as I've gotten this mouse, I have fragged out in Valorant. I probably match MVP like 4 or 5 games in a row, and I probably match MVP every like 2 games out of 3 games that I play. So this shape is very, very comfortable and it feels great in hand. Coming from such a small mouse, it was very, very comfortable to use something, even though it was like 10 grams heavier, because of the shape and the hump. It was very comfortable to claw grip and even palm grip sometimes, just to be able to have my palm lay on it when I'm holding angles. It just makes so much more, makes it so much more comfortable compared to like a Viper Mini or a smaller mouse with no hump, where you kind of have to keep your palm up the entire time with no mouse contact. So when you're holding angles, it's definitely much more comfortable on this shape compared to something smaller like a Viper Mini or a Final Mouse Starlight Small. So I would say the in-hand feel is very, very great. Probably, I would say it's up there with Zowie and Vaxi mouse with the best in-hand feeling shape of all time. So now let's talk about one of the other difference compared to GPX1, which is the connector. So on the GPX1, you had micro USB, and on the GPX2, you have USB-C, which is, I would say it was due for a change. However, I didn't really mind having micro USB on my desk, but it is better now that you have USB-C, so you don't have a bunch of cables on your desk. I just have one cable for both GPX and my Razer mouse, so they all use the same cable now, so which is great. And they also increased the battery life to 90 hours from 75 hours, and I've had no issues with battery life on either of the mouse. It lasts even longer if you adjust the pulling rate on the GPX2. You can lower it to 1000 hertz from 2000 hertz, and you can adjust the switches implementation from optical to hybrid. So now let's talk about the pulling rate, which is the big upgrade from the GPX1. So GPX1 only comes with 1000 hertz pulling rate, as everybody knows, and the GPX2 comes with optional 2000 hertz pulling rate. So you have the options to lower it to 1000 or keep it at 2000 for lesser battery life. But is there any significant performance difference compared to the 1000 hertz? And I did some click latency tests with the different pulling rate and the different click implementations. So the clicks, they have two modes on the GPX2. They have the hybrid mode, which is power saving, and they have the optical mode where it drains a little bit more battery life, but it reduces double clicking issues, and it might also help with performance. So I did this test where I filmed the clicks and the gun registering in Valorant practice range in slow motion in 240 frames per second exactly. So so when I click down the mouse button, that's when the sound pops up on the video. And from that moment of the sound, the click registering, I record from that moment to the shot being registered on screen, how many frames it took. So with a 240 frames per second video and using the GPX2 on 2000 hertz pulling rate with optical switch implementations, there was a 7 frame intervals from between this sound of the click to the gunshot registering in Valorant. There was 7 frames. Therefore, the equation is 7 over 240 times 1,000 milliseconds. 1,000 milliseconds in 1 second. So that is 29.17 milliseconds of latency on 2000 hertz and optical switches. So that is the fastest setup that you will have on the GPX2, which is 2000 hertz wireless pulling rate with optical switches, which is also the shortest battery life. So in that configuration, you get 7 frames, which is 29.17 milliseconds of latency. And then if you go to 2000 hertz pulling rate, but change the switch implementation from optical to hybrid, I got 8 frames. So that is 8 over 240 times 1000 milliseconds, which is 33.33 milliseconds from end to end, from the click sound to the shot being registered on screen. So that is 33.33 milliseconds, which is 4.1, which is like 4.16 or 17 millisecond difference compared to the optical switch implementation configuration. Now I dropped the GPX2 down from 2000 hertz to 1000 hertz pulling rate and put the switches back to optical. I still had 8 frames from the sound of the click to the shot being registered. So that is 33.33 milliseconds of end-to-end latency, which is the same as 2000 hertz hybrid. And then I did the 1000 hertz pulling rate and hybrid switch instead of optical, and I still got 8 frames. So 33.33 milliseconds of end-to-end latency. And then I tested the GPX1, which only has one configuration. You have 1000 hertz pulling, and then the switches, they're just Omron switches. So I had 8 frames also. So that is also 33.33 milliseconds of end-to-end latency. So in conclusion, the GPX1 has the same click latency performance to GPX2 if you have 2000 hertz hybrid or 1000 hertz optical hybrid. Only if you have 2000 hertz pulling rate with the optical configuration on the switches, you get 4.16 milliseconds of end-to-end latency difference compared to the GPX1. So if you want the fastest available performance out of the GPX2, you want it to set to 2000 hertz pulling rate and the switch is set in optical mode, which is the mode I played in. However, in game, it's very hard. It's practically impossible to feel this 4 millisecond end-to-end latency difference. So in game, I used both the hybrid and the optical, and I felt fine. I would even say I performed a little bit better on the hybrid configuration of the switches. So these are the games that I played on the hybrid switches. I MVP like 4 matches in a row when I just got the mouse and changed the DPI to 1600 and just went in and fragged out. I didn't even change it from hybrid to optical because on default it is on hybrid. And yeah, I would say I even performed a little bit better on hybrid than optical, but I would say the difference is very minimal. And I do, however, now play on the clicks on optical because of that little tiny bit of a performance boost. And sometimes it has a placebo effect on my mind, and I would think that I'm getting the best performance out of the mouse available. So that with that being said, I also tested my Razer Viper Mini Signature Edition 4K in the same test, and that end-to-end latency was 6 frames in 240 frames per second video. So that is 6 over 240 times 1000 milliseconds, which is 25 millisecond end-to-end latency from the sound of the clicks to the shot being registered on screen, which is the fastest, even 4.17 milliseconds faster than the 2000 optical configuration from the GPX2. So I would say if you want the best of the best performance, 4K, Razer 4K definitely has an edge over the 2K Logitech implementation. So that is it for the pulling rate and end-to-end latency performance test. Now let's talk about the sensor performance. So we have the Hero 2 sensor here compared to the Hero 1 sensor. So I believe the Hero 2 sensor goes up to 32,000 DPI compared to 27,000 or 28,000. I can take a look here. It goes up to 25,600. So 25,600 DPI compared to 32,000 DPI. I don't think anybody's using these mouse on that high of a DPI. I have mine set to 1600 because if you're gonna use anything above 1000 hertz pulling rate, so if you're gonna use 2000 hertz pulling rate, it's better to have a higher DPI than something like 800 or 400, as you reap a little bit more benefit of having a higher pulling rate while using a higher DPI. So I suggest to put your mouse on 1600 DPI at least if you're gonna use the 2000 hertz pulling rate configuration. And now let's talk about clicks and sound tests. So which is also something that's different on these mouse. As I have said in the performance, the Logitech GPX2 comes with the light force switches, so you can change them from optical to a hybrid for power saving, and the GPX1 just comes with standard Omron mechanical switches. And let's do a little bit of sound test for the clicks. Here's the GPX2 main clicks. Here's the GPX1 clicks. As you can hear, they sound very, very different. These GPX2 clicks are very, very snappy and clicky. They're kind of like if you had blue switches, and these are kind of feel like, I would say, red switches on keyboards. So these are very snappy, also much louder. So if you spam your keys, like if you spam your clicks a lot, and you're in like a, I don't know, public environment, you would definitely get more annoyed out of the GPX2 because the clicks are just much louder compared to the GPX1. And I know a lot of people have said the GPX2 has heavier clicks compared to GPX1. I would agree so. I think the clicks are a little bit more heavier. However, I don't feel like that's a bad thing. So you don't have a misclicks on the GPX2 compared to GPX1. So GPX1, you might have like misclicks because the force required to activate the clicks isn't that much compared to GPX2. So GPX2, I would like never have any misclicks when I'm playing games or anything like that. So I would say I prefer the GPX2 clicks over the GPX1 clicks, especially for games like Valorant and CSGO, like any shooter games. I think the snappy clicks are much better and feels much better in game compared to the GPX1. However, I do think the GPX1 clicks are better for aim trainers. So if you just like to spam clicks on aim trainers a lot, I would say GPX1 is better than GPX2. However, if you're playing any games, like real games, aim trainers are not real games, by the way. So if you just play real games, GPX2 clicks definitely are better than GPX1 clicks. And now let's talk about the scroll wheel. So the scroll wheel is also something that changed from GPX1. GPX2 has very light scroll wheel, and the steps are not very defined. So if you use scroll wheel to switch weapons, it's definitely going to be your downfall. So you should definitely switch to keyboard instead. I don't know why you would use scroll wheel to switch weapons still. You're just a noob, or you're simple. Yeah, simple still uses the scroll wheel to switch weapons, so he might have a hard time with this. Yeah, the steps are not very defined, but it is very good for if you have it bind to jump. You can like hop around in Apex and Valorant using the scroll wheel. And my GPX one scroll wheel is very worn out, so it's like very loud. I can do a sound test. So here's the GPX one scroll wheel, and my GPX two scroll wheel. Yeah, my GPX two scroll wheel is much quieter than GPX one scroll wheel. It's also because my GPX one scroll wheel is like kind of broken. I've used it for so long to jump, to hop around in Valorant and stuff like that. So yeah, the scroll wheel is less defined on the steps. So if you use scroll wheel to switch weapons, it might not be a good thing. And that is for it for the scroll wheel. Now let's talk about the side buttons. So I don't think there's much of a difference on the side buttons. The GPX 1 side buttons do feel a little bit more mushier than the GPX 2 side buttons. Just on my copy, maybe because my GPX 1 is, again, very worn out compared to GPX 2. And yeah, it still has quite a lot of post-travel on the side buttons. Not so much pre-travel, just post-travel on both of these copies. So I don't feel it in game. Again, I had no issues with the side buttons in game. I bind my jet dashes and Reina dismisses on the side buttons, and I have no issue clicking them. I don't even feel the post travel in game. So I don't want to talk about pre travel and post travel, the things that you cannot feel in game. We're just gonna focus on what actually matters. Like we're not gonna talk about click, wobble, like side to side, little bit plate. Like who's doing this in game? Like nobody. So yeah, the side buttons, they're solid side buttons. I mean, they're not the greatest side buttons in the world, I guess, but I have no issues using them in game. And I'm not worried about my side buttons when I'm ranking up and when I'm trying to ace was Reina in game. So we can do a sound test for the side buttons also. Here's the GPX 1 side buttons. And GPX 2 side buttons. And that is it for the side buttons. Now let's do a straight line test with the GPX. So here is the straight line test using the GPX2. So I'm just gonna keep my wrist on one point and not move my wrist, and only adjust my hand while my wrist is static, not moving. So I'm not moving my arm, I'm only moving my wrist like this, and see how straight the lines are based on the shape. So as you can see, the lines are pretty straight. So when you're doing left to right flicks and maneuvers in game, as long as you have your crosshair placement on the head level, it should stay head level, no matter how you kind of adjust your wrist. So yeah, it passes the straight line test. It's not looking like something like this, so you don't have to worry about the sensor and the shape position for in-game performance. And now let's talk about in-game performance of the mouse. As I have mentioned, the in-game performance is very solid, especially when you're using it to play tech FPS titles like CSGO, CS2, and Valorant. The hump and the shape makes it very comfortable to grip and lift it off and even lay your hands on it while holding angles for a long period of time. And I have rank performance to back this up. So here's my ranked performance. I have pretty much MVP. I pretty much MVP every game, and I frag out using this mouse. So I did, however, have one day where I didn't win a single game at all, and I was playing really ass. I think that's more of a me problem than mouse problem, and I feel like that's what happens most of the time. We try to blame it on our peripherals, blame it on our settings when it's just us having a bad day. So it's very good in-game performance. I have the MVPs and the stats to back it up. So if you're thinking to purchase this mouse, just to forget about it and just to grind the game, grind rank, grind competitive, it is definitely a mouse to go. That's why a lot of pros use it. They just grab it and then they forget about it. They're not thinking about their mouse while they're in game. They're more focused on strategies. They're more focused on their crosshair placement, the movement, their setup, like their in-game strategies and communications than what mouse they're using. So it is a solid mouse, probably the best mouse for pure esports. If you just want to grab something and forget about it, and if it ever breaks, you can grab a new one real quick compared to something like a Razer Viper Mini Signature Edition. If you're using it in a tournament and it breaks, then sorry, you might have to grab and move to a different mouse, because the Razer Viper Mini Signature Edition, it's not like you can just go to a Best Buy and grab one. However, with this, you can actually just go to Best Buy or Amazon. You can grab one, and it will be arrived in the second day, the same mouse. So that's why I prefer it for esports and esports professionals. If you want to go pro, if you want to just grind the game, it's definitely probably the best mouse to get, just to forget about it and focus on in-game performance. And let's talk about the price difference on the GPX1 and GPX2. So GPX2 is $159.99, and GPX1 is now on discount $129.99, I believe. Let me look this up. Yeah, GPX1 is now on a 19% discount, is $129.95, and GPX2 is $159. Exactly. So it's around a $30 difference. And would I think it's worth it to buy GPX2 instead of GPX1 with the $30? I would say yes, just because of the weight distribution. It has much better weight distribution, and I would think the 2000 hertz with the optical switches are worth the upgrade for $30. However, if you're not that serious about gaming, so if you're not top 5% in game, like competitive wise, if you're like iron or bronze in Valorant, if you're freaking gold Nova in CSGO, like it will not instantly rank you up in game. Only if you're like high rank, like Radiant or maybe professional, something like that, tier 2, you scrim. If you're top of the top already, then I would say it's a nice to have feature to upgrade. It feels very different in hand because of the weight distribution. So I would say it's much nicer on the GPX2 with the more even and spread out weight distribution compared to the back heavy GPX1 weight distribution. So I would say, yeah, go ahead and upgrade if you are very serious about your craft. If you're not that serious, if you're a casual gamer, then you can stay with this. And if you don't have either and you want to purchase one, I would say just go ahead and purchase the GPX2 instead of GPX1. Why would you want to go last generation? This one has USB-C and better sensor performance, better clicks. And yeah, I would say if you want to get a GPX, just go for the GPX2. If you already have a GPX1, but you're a casual player, then you can stay with the GPX1. If you're a professional, if you're a high-level player, then you can upgrade to the GPX2. So that is it for the most in-depth review of GPX. I know this is going to be a long-ass video. I don't know how long, but this is very long. It took me 50 times just to film this. So make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the video. And I stream on Twitch every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday. So I will have a link in the description of my Twitch channel. It's at userflynn. So come see me play Valorant. I will answer any setup questions, any mouse questions, questions I can answer about the setup. So yeah, stop by my stream if you want and leave a like, subscribe, and here I have another video on the screen. If you want to check it out, it's much appreciated. That is it for the most in-depth and the greatest G Pro X Superlight review video of all time. Peace.